I'm Petra Blaisse. I'm the founder of Studio Inside Outside in Amsterdam.
I'm Aura Melis. I'm an architect, a multidisciplinary designer.
My name is Jana Krapong. I'm a landscape architect and partner of Inside Outside.
I have an arts background and I grew into architecture on the way. And what I find important is that Inside Outside does everything but architecture. Unlike architecture, our work is much more sensitive to influences from the outside, both human influences and other.
I say what we say it's the golden age of the landscape architect right now.
Landscape architecture has changed in the past decades. From purely a visual, spatial profession to also a very functional, problem-solving, integrating profession that becomes more and more integral part of all kinds of professions that deal with the city and making of the city.
We collaborate with biologists and other scientists, ecologists and so on, to influence cities and the climate, especially in our case in urban situations, to improve the climate and the atmosphere and the health of city life.
In the denser and denser cities, we really need a balance between architecture and landscape. And that is also something that becomes more and more our scope of work.
And so we try to introduce, for instance, the whole awareness of living soil, not only plants and trees and so on, but also the whole soil build-up, thin or thick or completely natural or put together by humans to have effects to cool a city or to improve the CO2 situation. So I think our role as landscape architects is quite a potential element in the improvement of our environment, which is very urgent. Well, we have two timelines in a way, because I think although we see everything as one fluent existence, both inside and outside, there's of course a huge difference in the professions. The profession of interior architecture or working with textiles, weaving and printing and cutting and knitting and so on is totally different from creating landscapes or gardens. If you work with textiles, you can create a piece, a unique piece, as we do for public buildings, in usually quite monumental scale. You know that you create this piece and you install it, and then it's at its best. You hope it will live for 15 years, 20 years, but it's bound to degrade slowly. Or something will happen to it, or people can take it away, or something like that. But in fact, you create something and it's ready when you install it. Whereas for landscape, it's the other way around. You imagine something, you predict something.
We are not only designers, we are becoming more predictors, or designers and predictors at the same time. So we are trying to create conditions that lead to a certain development, considering the evolvement in time.
I think when Jana and her team and our teams create a landscape or a planting scheme for a garden or a park, we imagine it how it should be in 50 years. You know, so it's a prediction. And you look for all the recipes and all the ingredients to create the base of this prediction. So with textiles and interior, you have influences that make it degrade, and in landscape, you have another timeline. It starts when you finish your work, and then there's a whole life after that even can take different generations to come to this point that you want to achieve. I think our work, of course, we're not a real architecture institution here. We are really a creative studio. And we really want to improve the world or make people happy and more healthy and bring things in balance. Well, the library was supposed to become really a social center, open 7 days a week, and not all night, but till pretty late. We were in a very urban context. The site was in the middle of the city, and the footprint of the building quite large. So we had actually a slither of sidewalk space all around the so-called footprint. But the architects made a building that was very transparent. So you could really look in and look out from everywhere through the glass facade. So the whole fluidity between inside and outside was already very obvious. And we were asked to do both the interior and the landscape. And what we did there, and that's the use of textiles and planting actually combined, is to create a kind of library of trees and shrubs all around, depending on the street and of course, the physical situation of the plants. And we created carpets inside the interior that went from street to up to the different levels, and that changed color on the way. And these carpets were, we call them garden carpets, which meant that the plants actually really literally continued inside as textile gardens, with some real plants also mixed in. So I think those carpets, those garden carpets, improved the acoustics, but also were a way of wayfinding for people, and creating areas to come to rest, to sit and read, etc. And we also played with the scale in these garden carpets. They're quite large prints of our own pictures, photographs of plants. And they're very abstract when you are on them, but as the further you go away from the carpets, the sharper the image becomes, and you can really recognize the different plants that, again, are repeated outside. Yeah, what our role is, I think, is to react to the context and to react to the architecture. We are hired and invited by architects to become an integral part of their project. And therefore, you look at the project itself, and of course, you look around at where you are.
It's not only the plant and how it looks and the public use, but also what's happening on the ground, what are the climatic conditions, what's the wind conditions.
And what the natural circumstances are, and what the social circumstances are, and who the visitors are, and who the users are, the usual thing.
Education City is a special area within Doha, the capital of Qatar, where several universities are gathered, where education is the overarching theme, obviously, that's the name. And we were asked to design the landscapes surrounding the headquarters of the Qatar Fondation and the surroundings of the National Library of Qatar and the interior of that building, or some interior interventions of this building.
So it's partly a design decision how to create a garden, a semi-public garden, in one case for the Qatar Foundation headquarters, and a public garden for the National Library. So they were two completely different gardens. So it's a aesthetic decision, how you want to form and shape a garden. One is a roof garden and one is a full soil garden, as we call it. So one, you can do a natural growth, but on a roof garden you have to create circumstances that make things possible. That was an interesting thing. So it starts with an aesthetic and logistical decisions to create better airflow and to answer and to fit into the architectural concept. And then you can fill it in with certain plantings, or you always have to have a concept for planting. And of course, we're all into biodiverse and local plants. And so our team went and to the universities and studies all the local plant communities in the desert. And for one garden, we decided to, as it were, transplant some of these plant communities into this very, what I call synthetic circumstance of this roof garden with planters, etc. And this became a kind of educational, in the sense that we hope that students and universities will really adopt this garden as a form of research.
For a long time, we have been working side by side, architects, urban planners, landscape architects. And it's really now the time that we all work together into one direction.
Because of this whole urgency of environmental improvement and humanitarian, hopefully, improvement in the near future, we are more and more asking specialists to join our team.
So to really answer to the challenges of the future or the current time, it's really important that we all work together, integral.
So not only the architects, the engineers, the carpenters, and everyone that builds something, but also the scientists who can explain to us how these, in the smallest scale, things work. And things work, in this case, in the landscape or in the soil life or in the how you can really dive into the almost microscopic characteristics of things. And of course, we do that almost also in textiles more and more, because if you really want to understand how a big textile object will behave in the future or in a certain circumstance, you also need to understand exactly how yarns and, fibers work. But of course, in the landscape and in the soil, it's much and much and much more complex. We know there are millions of microorganisms in a handful of soil. So it's hugely interesting, and that indeed is much more visible how it influences our whole mentality of designing and becoming more a collaborative think tank of how to create circumstances in which nature can settle.